I never thought I'd open my father's study and find proof that he'd been murdered. By the people who stood beside me at his funeral. The same people who smiled when the lawyer said I got nothing. But what they didn't know was, my father left me one final message. And a key that would destroy them all. Hi, my name is Clara. And this is the story of how I uncovered my family's darkest secret. The lies behind my father's death, the hidden room inside our mansion. And the revenge that changed everything. Before we start, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your country right now. I love seeing where all of you are joining from. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end of this one. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It was the kind of storm that made everything feel heavier, even grief. I stood under the porch light, holding the last letter my father ever wrote to me. The ink had bled through from the rain, but one sentence was still clear. Clara, if anything happens to me, go to the study. The key is. That's it. It ended mid-sentence, almost like someone tore the page away before he could finish. After his funeral, the mansion didn't feel like home anymore. My stepmother, Evelyn, floated around the guests, pretending to cry. My half-brother, Mason, looked bored, sipping wine. They'd lived with my father for years, ever since I moved out after their marriage. But as soon as the guests left, something about their silence felt wrong. When I asked Evelyn about the will, she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, darling, the lawyer's handling it. Your father wanted everything simple." I didn't buy it. My father was never simple. He planned everything, down to what pen he used. So when Evelyn told me the study was under renovation, I knew she was lying. That night, when the whole house slept, I walked quietly down the hall. The air smelled like varnish and old books. The door to the study was closed, and locked. But when I turned the knob just slightly, it creaked open. Inside, the room was spotless. Too spotless. My father's desk was empty, drawers cleared, the globe missing. Only the rug looked wrong, just slightly out of place. When I bent down and lifted it, I saw something small taped underneath the floorboard. A brass key. I held it tight in my hand. That was when I knew the letter wasn't unfinished. He'd hidden the answer. The next morning, the lawyer arrived. Evelyn stood beside Mason, her hand resting proudly on his shoulder. Mr. Grant read aloud from the will. And each word felt like a knife. Everything. The company. The mansion. Even the cars. All left to Evelyn and Mason. And me? Just a token of affection. A small savings account. Evelyn turned to me, pretending sympathy. "I'm sure your father knew you didn't need much, dear," she said softly. But her eyes were sharp, mocking me. I stayed silent. Because inside, I wasn't angry. I was focused. That night, I went to find where the key belonged. It didn't fit any door in the house. Until I went to the basement, the cold, unfinished one my father never let anyone enter. At the very back, behind a row of old boxes, I found a small metal cabinet. The key turned perfectly. Inside were letters, all unopened. Each one addressed to me. Each one dated after my father's marriage to Evelyn. My hands shook as I opened the first. "Clara, if you're reading this, then Evelyn has won. She's been trying to take control of the company. And Mason isn't who you think he is." I froze. Mason isn't who you think he is? Then, who was he? The second letter said. She forged documents. She changed names. Mason is not my son. He's her nephew. She wanted him to inherit everything, even if it meant destroying me. By the time I reached the fifth letter, my tears had dried. Each one revealed more, the forgery, the manipulation, the threats. And in the last envelope, was a hand-drawn map of the house. My father's handwriting marked an X behind the wall of the study. "If they find this before you do, everything is lost. Trust only what you can touch, Clara." That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who cried at funerals. That night, I became something else. Someone who would find the truth. When Evelyn and Mason left for dinner, I took a screwdriver and returned to the study. The wallpaper near the bookshelf felt hollow. When I pried it open, a thin panel came loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small black box. And in that box, a USB drive and a ledger. The ledger was filled with bank transfers and foreign accounts, all under Evelyn's name. The USB had recordings. My father's voice. Angry. Tired. Afraid. You think you can take everything from me, Evelyn? Clara will find out. She's smarter than you think. Her voice answered, cold and calm. Then let's hope she never gets the chance. The audio cut. And the world went silent around me. That night, I realized. My father hadn't died naturally. He'd been silenced. And the people responsible were sleeping upstairs, under his roof. I swore then, I'd finish what he started. And when I did, they'd lose everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice from that recording, angry, desperate, and afraid. By sunrise, I had already made copies of everything, the USB drive, the ledger, and the letters. If Evelyn found out I had them, I needed proof ready to survive without me. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table, pretending nothing had changed. Evelyn poured her tea slowly, her movements elegant as always. Mason scrolled through his phone, smirking like the spoiled prince he thought he was. I asked casually, did Dad ever mention changing the will recently? Evelyn didn't look up. Why, darling? Are you hoping he forgot to add something for you? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I looked straight at her. No, I just thought maybe he realized how fake some people can be. For a moment, her hand froze midair, the spoon clinking softly against the porcelain. Then she regained that perfect calm. But I saw it, the flicker of fear. Later that day, I met Mr. Grant, my father's lawyer, privately. He looked uncomfortable as soon as I brought up Evelyn's name. When I showed him one of the letters, his face went pale. I never saw these, he said. I prepared the new will, but Evelyn insisted your father was unwell. She handled everything. So you never actually spoke to him the day it was signed? I asked. He hesitated. No. She said he couldn't talk. He just signed the papers she brought. I leaned closer. What if I told you my father recorded her, threatening him? Mr. Grant's hands trembled slightly. Clara, if that's true, then the will is invalid. And what she's done could be criminal. Exactly what I wanted to hear. That night, I decided to test Evelyn. At dinner, I mentioned that I'd found some of Dad's old notes in the study. She froze again, just for a second. Oh. What kind of notes? She asked, trying to sound casual. I smiled. The kind that might interest the police. Mason looked up from his plate, confused. Why would the police care about Dad's notes? Evelyn shot him a glare sharp enough to slice glass. Clara, darling, you really shouldn't dig through your father's private things. It's unhealthy to dwell on the past. I met her gaze and said softly. Oh, I'm not dwelling on the past. I'm preparing for your future. Later that night, when I returned to my room, I noticed something off. The door wasn't fully closed. And my drawer, the one where I'd kept the USB, was slightly open. I rushed to check. The drive was gone. I felt my pulse spike, but then I smiled to myself. Because the one she stole was the decoy. The real evidence was hidden where she'd never think to look. Inside the old piano my father taught me to play on. She thought she was smart. She had no idea she was walking into a trap. The next morning, I pretended to panic. I stormed into the kitchen. Evelyn. Someone's been in my room. My father's things are missing. She put on her innocent act again. Oh, Clara, maybe you misplaced them. You've been so emotional lately. Her voice dripped with false pity, but there was something else, relief. That told me everything I needed to know. She believed she'd won. 3 days later, Evelyn hosted a charity luncheon at the house. The perfect performance. The local press was there, and so were her business friends. She made a grand speech about honoring my late husband's legacy. I watched her from the corner of the room, her hand resting proudly on Mason's shoulder as if he were some heir to a throne. That was when I saw it, my father's pocket watch, the one he promised to leave to me, hanging from Mason's suit pocket like a trophy. I walked straight to him. "Nice watch," I said. He smirked. "Guess it suits the new man of the house." Something inside me snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just smiled, turned, and walked toward the guests. I raised my glass and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Before we toast to family, I'd like to show you all something my father left behind." Evelyn's smile faltered instantly. "Clara, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's exactly the time," I interrupted. I plugged a small speaker into my phone and hit play. My father's voice filled the room. "You think you can take everything from me, Evelyn? Clara will find out." Gasps rippled through the guests. Her face went white. "Then let's hope she never gets the chance," Evelyn's voice answered from the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at her and said quietly, "Guess I did get the chance." Evelyn tried to recover. She laughed weakly. "That recording is fake. My husband was sick, he imagined things." But her hands were trembling, and the guests saw it. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, stepped forward and said, "I can verify that's his voice. And if the documents Clara showed me are real, this entire estate may be under investigation." People began whispering. Mason slammed his glass down, furious. "Dad always loved you more. You just can't stand that he left everything to us." I turned toward him. "He left everything to the truth, Mason. And that's me." That night, Evelyn and Mason left the house, not in their luxury car, but in a police cruiser. The investigation opened fast. Forgery. Coercion. Fraud. Every account my father had was tied to Evelyn's fake shell companies. They thought I'd destroy them quietly. But I didn't stop there. I gave the entire story, letters, files, recordings, to a journalist my father trusted years ago. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. The house became mine again, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt haunted. The study, the walls, even the silence, all carried his memory. But I kept one promise. I restored his old office exactly the way it was. I placed the black box on his desk. And I whispered, "You were right, Dad. The truth was always buried under their lies." I turned off the lights and walked away, leaving the ghosts of betrayal locked where they belonged. They say when you dig up the truth, you should be ready to face what comes crawling out with it. I thought justice would bring peace. But after the headlines, the court hearings, and the whispers in every corner of town, I realized peace doesn't come after revenge. It comes after destruction. The first few days after Evelyn's arrest were almost silent. Reporters camped outside the gate, cameras flashing every time I stepped out. I ignored them. I had bigger ghosts to deal with. The mansion felt different now. Empty but restless, like the house itself remembered what had happened inside its walls. Sometimes, I'd hear a floorboard creak at night or smell my father's cologne lingering near the study. Maybe it was memory. Maybe something else. A week later, I got a call from Detective Rains, the lead investigator. He wanted me at the precinct. When I arrived, he looked tired, his desk covered in files. He said, "We've gone through the accounts, Clara. You were right about everything." He slid a file toward me. Inside were photos, signatures, offshore records, wire transfers. And one more thing, a death certificate that didn't belong. "Your father's business partner," he said, "died 6 months before your father did. But the same money trail shows Evelyn was involved." I stared at it. "What are you saying?" He leaned back. "I'm saying this woman's done it before. Your father wasn't her first." That night, I sat in the study, staring at my father's chair. Every letter he wrote me, every warning, suddenly carried new weight. He'd seen her for what she was, long before I did. And Mason. I didn't feel hate anymore. Just pity. He'd been raised on her lies, used as her shield, her puppet. Still, pity didn't erase what he'd done. 2 months passed before the trial began. Evelyn refused to speak to anyone, not even her lawyers. But Mason, he cracked. He took a plea deal in exchange for testimony. And the things he said in that courtroom silenced even the judge. She said she'd make me a real heir, he confessed, voice trembling. She said if Dad didn't change the will, she'd take care of it herself. I closed my eyes, my nails digging into my palms. Every nightmare I'd had about my father's last days became real. Evelyn hadn't just lied, she'd poisoned him. Slowly. Carefully. Quietly. When the verdict came, the words didn't sound like victory. They sounded like a door slamming shut on a chapter one never wanted to open. Evelyn Grant, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison for fraud, forgery, and second-degree murder. The courtroom gasped. She didn't flinch. She just turned her head and looked directly at me. And smiled. A smile so small, so venomous, it froze my blood. Later, when they led her past me in handcuffs, she leaned slightly closer and whispered. You think you've won, Clara. But you'll see. The house never forgets. I didn't respond. But that night, her words echoed in my head. The house never forgets. A few weeks later, I started fixing the mansion, repainting, replacing furniture, restoring the study exactly as my father left it. I wanted it to feel alive again. But every time I walked past the piano, the one where I'd hidden the real USB, I swore I heard faint music. Notes played softly, out of nowhere. I even removed the lid once, thinking maybe some vibration or draft caused it. Nothing. Just silence. Still, sometimes when I walked away, I'd hear the faint echo of my father's favorite song, the same melody he used to hum while working late. One night, while sorting his old ledgers, I found an envelope addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. It had no stamp, no date. Just my name, Clara. Inside was a single note. Truth comes with a price. You took back what was stolen. But some debts are paid in silence. There was no signature. But taped beneath the note was my father's missing pocket watch. The same one Mason had been wearing the day of the luncheon. I never told anyone about that letter. Maybe Mason smuggled it out. Maybe someone from the firm found it and sent it to me. Or maybe, my father had one more message waiting all along. Whatever the truth was, I stopped trying to explain it. Some secrets don't need answers. They just need to stay buried where they belong. Months later, I visited the prison for the last time. Not for closure, but for confirmation. Evelyn sat behind the glass, older somehow, but her eyes still sharp. Come to gloat, she asked. I said quietly, I came to tell you one thing. You were wrong. She raised an eyebrow. About what? The house doesn't remember you, I said. It remembers him. For the first time, her mask broke. A crack of something, fear, maybe, flashed across her face. I stood, placed my hand on the glass, and whispered. You can rot here. But he still lives in that house. Not you. Then I walked away. Her scream followed me down the hall, echoing against the walls. That night, I returned home and lit every candle in the study. The air felt heavy but peaceful, like someone was finally at rest. I opened his journal, the last page blank, and wrote my own words beneath it. Justice isn't peace. But it's a start. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and left the room, forever. Months passed. The towns stopped whispering my name. The newspapers found new tragedies to feed on. And yet, I still felt that something unfinished lingered behind the quiet walls of the estate. I had inherited everything, money, land, silence. But not peace. One rainy evening, the lawyer handling my father's archives called. He'd found another safe deposit box registered in both our names. Inside, there was no jewelry, no deeds, only a cassette tape labeled, For Clara, After It Ends. I didn't own a player anymore, so I found one in the attic, dust-covered, humming when plugged in. When I pressed play, the tape crackled, then his voice came through. Steady, kind, the voice I'd almost forgotten. If you're hearing this, then you already know what she did. I'm sorry, Clara. I wanted to protect you, but I couldn't. I left you the company, but more than that, I left you the truth. Guard it. Don't let greed turn you into what destroyed us. His breath caught, as if he knew time was running out. Remember, love can blind, but guilt will always find a way home. The tape clicked off. I sat there for a long time. The rain outside sounded like a clock ticking backward. Like the past trying to crawl its way out of the mud. That night, I dreamed of the house again. But this time, it was quiet. No piano. No whispers. Just the faint scent of his cologne, and the feeling that he was finally free. When I woke, the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains. I walked to the window and whispered. "It's over, Dad. She can't hurt us anymore." Somewhere deep inside, I felt the mansion breathe again. Weeks later, I donated half the inheritance to rebuild the orphanage my father once funded. The rest I used to turn the estate into a foundation. The Grant Home for Truth and Justice. Reporters tried to paint it as poetic irony. Let them. I didn't do it for headlines. I did it so his name wouldn't rot beside hers. On the night of the opening ceremony, I stood alone at the gates, watching the crowd leave. A gust of wind brushed past, carrying the faint sound of that same old melody. The piano again, only one note, long and low, like a goodbye. I smiled. Maybe ghosts don't haunt places. Maybe they guard them. Until we learn how to move on. I locked the doors, walked down the long driveway. And never looked back. The house stood tall behind me, not cursed anymore. Just quiet. Just home. Sometimes, karma doesn't come with fire or thunder. Sometimes, it comes with silence. And the peace of knowing the truth finally rests where it belongs. If you were here till the end, tell me where you're listening from. And remember, secrets buried in family walls always find their voice again. Subscribe for more dark true style stories like this one.